The following is a true story. In my early 20s, I worked in a call centre for a well-known tech company. If you've ever worked in a large-scale call centre, you know that it's common that you're not given assigned seating, so who you sit next to depends on your shift and desk availability. After I'd worked for my company for about 6 months, a group of new hires entered the floor. A tall, skinny man sat down next to me and said hello. I returned his greeting and accepted an incoming call right after. As I listened to my customer, I had a chance to take a look at my desk buddy. He smelled of stale cigarettes, his hair was greasy, and his clothes were wrinkled and obviously too large for his frame. This was no surprise, as the call centre often hired people who were down on their luck, but the next few weeks would prove to be some of the most unnerving I've ever experienced. His name was Ian. We happened to work the same shift, which began at 5 AM and included weekends. His energy was chaotic, and if no one was available for him to talk to, he typically spent his breaks walking quickly around the 5-floor building. He also had a habit of appearing in whatever room I happened to be in during my own breaks. If a desk close to mine was open, he would use it. When I walked out into the entryway of the building, he would be waiting by the front door. When I exited the restroom, he would be leaning against a wall in the hallway. When I took my lunch breaks, he would always walk into the break room and make a beeline for my table. He even made it a point to leave his desk and follow me into elevators at every opportunity. If I was left alone with him, he would tell me long, meandering stories about his chaotic life and ask uncomfortable, prying questions about my life and schedule. All of this might not have been as creepy if the majority of it hadn't occurred before sunrise and in a building that was mostly unoccupied. I lacked the confidence that I now have in my early 30s, and yes, I had told my supervisor and team lead about this on several occasions with no results. One Friday morning, as I took my usual lunch break at around 9 AM, I sat down at a table with 2 co-workers who had become friends. We had all been there in the same pool of new hires. They were aware of the debacle involving Ian, and if they could, they would alert me when he was nearby. On this particular morning, my back was facing the hallway outside of the break room. As I was speaking to one of my co-workers, Brittany, her face went from warm and smiling to attentive and tense as she looked over my shoulder. When this happened, I heard Ian say, very loudly, "Oh look, there's my cute little redhead." I shrunk into my seat. I instantly wanted to run and hide. Without acknowledging anyone else at the table, Ian pulled out the chair next to mine and sat down. My co-workers gave him weak smiles. I looked up and realised that his eyes were red and he appeared to be unsteady. I could smell hard liquor on his breath as he spoke. His clothes looked like he had been wearing them for the last 3 days. He leaned on the table, looked at me, and slurred, "Why haven't we gone out to dinner yet?" "Sorry, I don't date co-workers," I said flatly. Ian looked at my co-workers. "Isn't she cute?" He practically shouted, "I like you, Anna." One of his hands flopped heavily onto one of my shoulders. Without thinking, I stood up and said to my co-workers, "I'll see you guys on the floor. I should get going." Ian looked insulted as I pushed in my chair and walked away. As I left the room, I heard him yell, "I love you." I scurried to the nearest elevator. As the doors began to close, I heard a chair scrape across the tile floor, followed by quick footsteps heading in my direction. "Why won't you talk to me? Come back," Ian shouted. A couple of minutes later, the elevator doors opened and I shakily returned to my desk. My shift finally ended at 3 PM. The company parking lot was huge, and on that particular day, I had to park unusually far from the front doors of the building. Remembering what my mum had taught me as a teenager, I walked to my car with my keys individually squeezed between my fingers, ready to be used as weapons if necessary. In spite of the time of day, no one else was in the parking lot. My heart thumped against my chest as my head moved in a swivel while I walked. "Hey!" a familiar male voice shouted behind me. A cold shock jolted up my spine and I jumped, breaking into a jog. "Hey!" he yelled again. "Don't ignore me, stop!" I could hear footsteps approaching and keys jingling from one of his pockets. As I jogged, I gripped my car fob in my hand. From a few feet away, I double-clicked the fob, unlocking the doors. I flung the door open, leaped inside, and locked the doors behind me just as Ian approached with a furious look on his face. I looked out the window as I stuck my key into the ignition and started the engine. I threw the car into reverse, backed out before he could block me in, threw the car back into drive, and took off. In the rearview mirror, I could see him angrily throw his hands up in the air. In that moment, I decided to call in sick the next day and then alert HR regarding my experience. Human resources didn't seem overly concerned when I called them. No resolution was given, but when I returned to work 2 days later, Ian wasn't there. He was also absent on days 3, 4, and 5. On day 6, after my shift ended, I turned on the local news. Ian Elias, aged 47, shot and killed his ex-wife. After that, he took his 2 young daughters and went across town. He then had a standoff with the police before shooting and killing himself. His daughters were unharmed, thank goodness. As I stood in front of my TV, I felt my mouth fall open. I could hardly believe my ears. I felt faint as I recalled my last interaction with him, wondering what would have happened if he had caught up with me in his mental state at that time. Ladies, trust your instincts. If you feel uncomfortable at work, please tell human resources. Although I was completely unharmed, I wish I had done so sooner. Clearly Ian had some serious mental health issues, but a part of me still feels like this was a close call, and to see this man on the news later on was nothing short of surreal. I was about 4 or 5 years old, and my parents had just separated. My mum was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mum had a window open in her room, which was directly behind the bed, above the headboard. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the doorframe of my mum's room. A door was open, and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mum and wake her up. In the 3 to 4 seconds it took for her to wake up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up towards the doorframe, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. Again, we were on the first floor, and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed, and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came, but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mum swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. At the time of this story, I was a 20-year-old female. My boyfriend and I decided to go fishing at a local pond with his friend. The location was in a nice area, with little to no crime. It was nighttime, in the middle of the summer, probably getting close to 11 PM. When we arrived, there were no vehicles in the small parking lot, just a single moped. We didn't see anyone at first, so we picked our spot close to the gravel parking lot. We set up our gear and began fishing with their special glow-in-the-dark bobbers. At this moment, I wasn't aware, but my boyfriend had spotted the presumed owner of the moped walking around the perimeter of the pond. Once he had gotten a good distance away, as the pond was a decent size, he asked me if I had seen the guy walking around by himself acting strangely. I hadn't seen him, but I was curious as to what he was doing and why he was out here, alone, so late at night. To add to this, my boyfriend also said that he was dressed in all black, more specifically, a trench coat and boots. My boyfriend's friend is the type of person that loves exploring nature and catching small animals, so after a few moments, he told us that he would be back after he goes to find some frogs and turtles. I still haven't spotted the strange man that my boyfriend described, as I keep looking around and asking him, "Do you see him? Where's he at?" Probably 20 or so minutes later, his friend comes back and tells us something that was so strange I couldn't wrap my head around it. He said that when he was looking for animals, He was startled by a man who tried to scare him by yelling nonsense sounds in a way too difficult to describe in writing. He's obviously caught off guard and walks back to where we are. After he tells us what happened, we laugh and are utterly confused as to what just occurred. I'm still on the lookout for the guy just because I'm curious, occasionally asking where he's at and if anyone sees him. We brush it off as much as we can and I continue fishing. A while later, my boyfriend and his friend begin packing up, but I'm enjoying myself and I don't want to leave. I'm still asking them, where's that weird guy? I want to see what he looks like. Clearly, as I'm not getting the hint, my boyfriend tells me that we need to leave and to pack up my things. Of course, my bobber's tangled at this point, and I'm standing there for what seems like forever trying to fix it before hauling it into the trunk. We finally get into the car and head home. On the way home, my boyfriend tells me something that still haunts me to this day. After the man had tried scaring our friend, he had walked all the way around the pond to where we were at. He tells me that as we were standing fishing, the man was behind us, just staring at us from about 10 feet away. Mind you, this was also while I'm being a clueless fool asking where the weird guy was. To my ignorance, he was there the entire time. What makes it even scarier is that there was a light behind the man, so his face was completely enshrouded in the shadows. This happened 7 years ago, but I still remember the fear I felt like it was yesterday. When I was in my early 20s, I worked the night shift at a bakery, making donuts. I loved that job. 3 nights of the week, I would be with my co-worker, and 2 nights I would work alone. It was summertime, and we were having some problems with the AC, so the maintenance guy, Andy, came at night when I was on the clock to work. The bakery was small and crowded during the day, so it was best for him to come when it was empty. Management always let me know when Andy would be there, so it was never a surprise. At first he was very pleasant, and I had no issues sharing space with him as we worked. One evening this changed. One of my co-workers was running a little late. She said she had lost track of time in the shower, so Andy piped in saying, "We should all shower together to save time," and started laughing. It was creepy as hell. I'd also stated I lived alone, and he responded with, "Good, I have you to myself then." After this night, I realised Andy wasn't the kind of guy I thought he was. I stopped speaking to him, unless I had to, and before long, the AC was repaired, and I thought I was free of him. Fast forward to a night a few weeks later, I'm working alone. It's 2 a.m, I'm trying out donuts, when all of a sudden, I hear a loud banging on the front window. Startled, I look up and see it's Andy. He's calling my name and asking to be let in. No one had said anything to me about him coming that night. Andy then starts pulling on the front door handles. Luckily, it's locked. I run into a corner of the bakery where he can't see me, and I try calling my manager with no response. The phone starts ringing, and I can see the caller ID from where I'm sitting. It's Andy. He's being relentless and won't stop banging on the window, trying to pry the door open. My fear rising, I dial 911. The cops arrive within 10 minutes and search Andy's vehicle. In the back seat, they find duct tape, a knife, and rope. They can't do anything though, because he hasn't harmed me. Andy told the police he was there to fix the AC. My manager calls me back in the morning and tells me the AC is working fine, and they never asked Andy to come.